All right, let's get started. Well, thank you all for joining us today on our webinar. We are going to be talking about how Amazon verified permissions fits into the identity and policy orchestration landscape at large. And we've got some really interesting stuff to share with you all today. We're excited to get going. So let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Mark Callahan. I am the head of product marketing here at Strata Identity. And joining me is Jerry Gable, our head of standards. Hi, Jerry.
Hello, Mark.
Well, let's go ahead and dig in. We got a lot of stuff to cover, and excited to have this conversation with you as we think about Amazon verified permissions and what it means for us and others in the identity space. So as we look at our agenda, we're going to be covering three different topics today. First and foremost is, of course, what is Amazon verified permissions? We reference software for it, Hexa, which is now an open source project within the CNCF as a sandbox project. The second part of our session is going to be talking about how does IDQL and Hexa interact and relate to AVP. And then the third part of our session will be putting on our Strata hats and talking about how Strata's core product, the Mavericks Identity Orchestration Platform, can actually be used to extend somebody's investment in resources and time and effort into AVP so that you can not only add AVP to existing applications, but also extend the policies that you create in AVP to other cloud platforms. So lots to cover. Let's just go ahead and dive into the first topic. So give us the overview. So as we think about what AVP is, what is at its core Amazon verified permissions, and how does it relate to other systems that we're familiar with?
Yeah, we'll do, Mark. And I'm as excited as you are to talk about this topic today. It seems like there's a lot of investment and a lot of activity in the whole fine-grained authorization space these days, both from a commercial product perspective, which Amazon verified permissions is, plus in the open source world. So as you mentioned previously, AVP, as we'll shorten it today, was announced at reInvent last month. So it is another fine-grained authorization service or product that customers can use. And it's separate from the Amazon IAM roles that they use in their platform and other parts of AWS, right? So this is for developers. It's targeted toward developers who are building custom applications so that they can have a system where access rules and policies are defined. And then there's this runtime engine that does evaluations of requests against those policies so that you can separate that security function from the logic of your business application. And then there'll be a number of, there'll be libraries, for example, of how you can connect to Amazon verified permissions from a Lambda function or, from other Amazon services, for example. And then what's interesting too, that's really core to what we're doing with IDQL and Hexa is the fact that Amazon announced a new policy language associated with verified permissions, which they call Cedar, like the tree. And so that's really interesting, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the other thing is that when AVP is generally available today, it's only in a preview mode. You'll be able to define policies either with their user interface, with an API call, or as well with a command line interface. So there'll be a number of ways to author and maintain those policies within Cedar. And then so your runtime apps will be able to call this service. Can Mark do this function? And you'll get back the classic permit or deny response from that. And then the other thing is what's really interesting about verified permissions in Cedar is that Amazon includes a built-in auditing capability so that you can analyze and report on, the policies that have been written. And that's, somewhat unusual in the authorization product space.
Absolutely. Pretty critical. And you and I were talking about, you said, it is in another authorization service. And you and I had been talking when we saw the original announcement, why another fine-grained authorization service. And there's one of the answers right there is that audit capability that's going to be so critical moving forward with custom apps.
That's right. And when we think about other authorization products or services that are out there, we're thinking of things like Open Policy Agent, OPA, things that are based on the XACML standard, XACML. There's even systems based on the Google Zanzibar white paper that came out some time ago. And there, of course, are proprietary products for fine grained authorization out there as well.
Gotcha. Okay, so that gives us sort of the lay of the land, what we've learned that AVP is and how it functions and why it was created. A little bit of information about how it relates to those other authorization services that we're all quite familiar with. So let's talk about Cedar. You mentioned Cedar, of course, like the tree. So we have a new language. And so as we're thinking about Cedar, what is it and how does it relate to the work that we've done with IDQL? I know I cribbed a slide from the presentation at reInvent, setting the stage a little bit here as we think about it.
Right. Well, the other way to think about this is how does Cedar compare to other products that are out there that we mentioned? So OPA, Open Policy Agent, has its policy language called Rego. And the XACML standard has a policy language in there. So you might be wondering, well, why does Cedar exist? Why did Amazon build Cedar anew? Well, if you this clip here is from their presentation, the announcement at reInvent, and what they explained was they looked at a number of existing languages, and what they wanted to address were three main requirements. One is the expressiveness of the language. The second is performance. And the third was that auditing function that I mentioned previously. So these were the reasons why they built Cedar the way they did. Does that make sense so far?
Totally follow. Yeah, absolutely. And that was, as we were thinking around the whys and hows of where we created IDQL, can definitely see the parallels here.
Absolutely. And furthermore, some of the parallels, Cedar is a tuple-based language. It's subject.
Tuple. Oh, okay. Sorry. Tuple. Yes.
Yeah. The subject, action, resource, and context. It's a declarative language. It combines both a role-based as well as attribute-based concepts. And then when we look at Cedar, when we look at IDQL, we can see that, IDQL is also a declarative language, and it's also based on a tuple model. In our case, a five tuples, subject, action, object, scope, and condition. But what's different, though, is IDQL is not meant to be, it's not an authorization service, not a runtime service. We defined IDQL in a generic and declarative format so that it could be translated into the format of a target system. In this case, Amazon Verified Permissions and Cedar. So we don't have a system that does the runtime evaluation or enforcement. That's totally done by the target system, right? So we're really a policy management service on the front end.
Right. And we saw in the notes that that this how this is being structured. And so as we're thinking about where is there interoperability, that was our big thing that we set out to do. Like multi-cloud policy orchestration simply wasn't possible until we worked on the IDQL effort and the initiative. And so as we're thinking about interoperability, Cedar and AVP are obviously Amazon products. But as we think about the standard business, chances are they're using multiple clouds. They're using GCP, they're using Azure as well. And they're going to be doing a lot of work with AVP and Cedar. And you're thinking about, what is the interoperability with other clouds and where does IDQL fit into that? And I grabbed our slide from the IDQL overview. How do we fit in here?
Yeah, well, this is just another target system that we would support, right? If you go left to right here, IDQL is that format that we were just talking about, so it's a common way that enterprise customers can author and manage access policies. And then using the Hexa open source policy orchestration capability, that's where we can connect to those target systems, do policy translation, and then orchestrate or activate the translated policies into those runtime environments. So Amazon Verified Permissions and Cedar will be another one that we support in our growing list of supported target environments.
Got it. And it speaks to, of course, the fact that since it is a runtime system, that's why the performance aspect of Cedar was so critical, is that you couldn't have any delays, you couldn't introduce anything that causes latency in the authorization process for an app. And so very much following you through the process here.
Right, and also it just gives us a clean demarcation, right? We're again, to be clear, we're operating as a policy management or administrative function. We're not part of the runtime execution side.
Sure. And thinking about another reason, that we kicked off the IDQL and Hexa initiative was the idea that there are a lot of these different protocols out there in different systems, and trying to find that unicorn hire who's an expert in every single one is getting increasingly difficult. And the idea that you might be able to use IDQL and Hexa to become sort of this universal translator of sorts across all of those takes some of the stress out of that for businesses who are trying to find that single expert. You don't need that.
Well, you don't need as many.
Okay.
It's not like, just to be clear, it's not like we would be able to eliminate all of the expertise.
So you're saying I can't do it myself is what we're getting at there. Yes, I follow. Yes,
that's fair enough. But I would say you would need fewer experts in the individual target systems, but you certainly need some of that expertise available. But then you can really leverage the capability of IDQL and Hexa and use that as a real leverage point to cover more systems and do it in a consistent way.
Gotcha. So this, of course, begs the question, everyone wants to see, okay, so I've heard the story. We've learned a little bit about AVP. We've learned about Cedar. We've seen the intersection of IDQL and Hexa with them. As we look towards a demo, let's go ahead and throw caution to the wind and see if we can actually get one together. And so I know in talking through the process, we wanted to show there is no smoke and mirrors here. This is fully functioning prototype code. What can we expect?
Yeah, emphasis on prototype. So as we mentioned, the Cedar and policy language was just announced last month. So the crew here, and a big shout out to Phil Hunt on the working group team here for putting together a prototype mapping capability. So what you'll see here in a moment is I'll show you some IDQL, a simple IDQL example policy in JSON. We'll put that through the Hexa mapper, as we're calling it at the moment. It's a command line interface. I'll copy that output, which will be a Cedar a Cedar compliant policy, and go to the Cedar playground, which is publicly available right now. And we'll paste that policy in there. We'll do some evaluation tests, as you'll see. We'll make a change to the policy, pull that from the playground, go back into the Hexa command line interface, and convert that changed Cedar policy into compliant IDQL. So we'll do a round trip here if all things go well.
I love it. And that's, always important, because you want to make sure you can undo what you've done, but also that it goes both ways, that, this isn't just a one-way function, that this works both ways. So let's go ahead and do it. Let's jump into the demo. I'm going to let you grab the screen here and walk us and the audience through what the demo looks like.
All right. And hopefully the demo demons will be kept at bay today.
We always qualify it as a prototype. And so but nevertheless, this will be great.
Yeah, so you'll see most of the prototype action here in my terminal window, but ultimately we'll add the functionality to user interface that'll render here in a moment. So this is where we connect to different cloud platforms and do discovery, manage application policies, and then do orchestration between those systems. And then this is the Cedar playground that I mentioned, and there will be a link in the reference list here at the end of the session as well. So this is where I'll paste the converted policy into this window, and we'll do some testing with it. So back to my terminal window here. So I've got already in a file this basic IDQL policy. It says that, and we're doing a twist on the photo sharing app that's already in the Cedar playground. So what this policy says is that vacation photo judges can view any photos in the album of Alice's vacation. So that's what we're going to be doing.
Okay.
So let's get out of this. And then what we do is, I'll get my right command here.
And one thing I was going to point out, you mentioned the link to the Cedar playground will be at the end. We'll also be sharing the Hexa link, so you can get to that software as well. So everything that you're going to be sharing, people can actually go out and experiment with themselves.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
So here I'm executing the Hexa mapper. Minus T is to the target is Amazon Cedar. And then this is the input file down here, and it'll give the output right on the screen here. It's pretty quick. Just waiting for that to completely render. So this is the Cedar policy. So we've converted that IDQL to Cedar, and we're just going to copy that, go to the playground, paste it here. And the first thing you see when you paste something into the playground is whether it's syntactically correct or not. So for example, if I erase that semicolon, it tells me that there is an error on that line.
Gotcha.
All right. And then over here on the right, there's a form you can fill in to actually execute a query against the policy. And down in the window below here is some entity data that the engine needs to know about. So it needs to know about things like Alice and Bob. Of course, they're in here. Stacy and Giuseppe are other users in here. There's a role that we'll use in a moment, or we'll see it in action, the photo judges role. We're also going to use this AVT team group. And then we see this is the resource, the album of Alice's vacation. And here's the resource we're actually going to try to view. This is the photo, and it's in this particular album. And so first we're going to ask, okay, can Bob view this vacation photo? And we hit enter. Great. Bob can view it. Just to see that it's live and working. We'll try Stacy if I can type. Stacy cannot, she's not authorized. What about Giuseppe? So he's on the AVT team. Maybe we'd like some of the AV folks to take a look at these photos as well. Well, he can't see it at the moment. So to fix that, let's create a new policy. So I'm just copying that existing one. And since he's on the AV team, let's give the AV team access. But this is not a role, it's a user group.
Okay.
So let's just change that. You can see I didn't change the syntax, I'm just changing some of the terms, so there was no issues with that. Now if I see if Giuseppe can access this photo, yes, he can. Perfect. Let's just make sure Bob can still access it as well. Yes, he can also. Great. So that's what we've done so far. Just to recap, we've taken IDQL, translated to Cedar, put it in the Cedar playground, and ran some tests that worked fine. And then we changed the policy, ran some more tests. So we're happy with this now. And maybe we want to convert this back to IDQL because we want to use this in some other system, for example. So I can copy from this window, go back to our UI here. And I've got this already in a file.
Great. And actually, we do have a question that's apropos. You'll address this, I'm sure, in the demo, but it was around how does the Cedar specific notation in IDQL map to other targets? So as we're going through the demo, just thinking out loud about that.
Okay, sure. All right. So this is the change file that I just copied over from the playground.
Got it.
And now what I want to do is use that as input to translate back to back to IDQL. So here's again the Hexa mapper. The target is AWS Cedar. The -P is an indicator that I want to parse it back into IDQL. And then the changed Cedar file is the one we just worked on in the playground. And it just writes to the screen here, as we can see. You can also put it to a file. But here is now the Cedar that's translated back to IDQL. And so this was the original policy where photo judges can view the vacation album. But now down here, we can see that the AV team also has access. So that's a full round trip. And now we could, translate this or, deploy this policy in an OPA server. Maybe I have other apps that need to use the same policy, or they're deployed on a different cloud system. Or maybe I want to translate this to Google's common expression language and use the policies over on GCP. So that's the power, for the question that came in. That's the power here of being able to use IDQL as the standard format, because we can now translate that into other target systems.
Very cool.
Yeah, we're super excited about this demo, especially to be able to bring it to the audience here so quickly after the Amazon reInvent announcement. That's
awesome. That is, and the demo gods certainly played well with us today. So that was always
yes, that's always a relief.
It is, right? So we've covered the first part of what we just said we were discussing, which was the open source side of this. So how does it relate to IDQL and Hexa? And now, you and I both obviously work here at Strata, and we're thinking forward to some of the commercial side of this. And we're thinking about, from our perspective, we have an identity orchestration platform. And as we're looking at how we can use that platform to project AVP policies elsewhere, what were some of the things that we learned about AVP just from the doc so far that we think we can actually help immediately right out the door?
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing is that, they focus that this is really targeted toward building new or building custom applications. And to your point, well, what about all of the the legacy inventory we have of existing applications? And so just like what we do with Strata Mavericks for other customers, we can put the Mavericks system in front of existing applications and do lots of things to modernize identity, authentication, and access to them. So I think, for us at Strata on the commercial product side, it's, another way we can enhance and modernize those existing apps to take advantage of, the advanced policy capabilities within Amazon verified permissions when it becomes available, because we know there's so many customers using Amazon Web Services, where it's our expectation that's going to get a good amount of adoption pretty quickly.
That's great. Well, as we're looking at the core capabilities of the Mavericks platform, I think another thing that comes to mind that I didn't actually document here, but I've been talking about this, and other members of our team, is you talked about modernization of an app and being able to do this in a no-code way. While not part of AVP specifically, as we think about somebody moving to Amazon Identity from a legacy identity system such as SiteMinder, maybe wanting to go cognito, we have a path forward for that as well.
That's right. And, I think we're going to be talking about that in a future webinar, but that's, one of those typical examples that I mentioned, moving from a legacy identity platform, to a more modern one like cognito.
Gotcha. So yep. Watch this space. We're going to be back with more as we talk about other aspects of Amazon Identity.
That's right.
Great. Well, let me get us to a place of summary, because I know that we'd like to grab a couple of questions. I've got a couple more over here that I want to run by you as we get into it. But if you were to give us some parting words, some words of wisdom, as we think about, the open source side of this, the intersection of IDQL and Hexa with AVP and Cedar, and also that commercial side of the Mavericks identity orchestration platform. Final thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons we were so excited about hearing this announcement of Amazon verified permissions, because it really plays into the whole reason for the existence of IDQL and Hexa, that is to manage, the disparate and proprietary policies that are scattered across the multi-cloud environment. That's really the mission of IDQL and Hexa, is to bring some normalization to that world and to unify these systems, so that the idea here is use IDQL as the cornerstone, the translatable declarative model for access policies, and then we can see how Hexa, the orchestration open source software, can be extended to so quickly to adopt to a new model here that Amazon has announced. So we're really excited to be part of this and be able to show this today, and also invite you to go to our project website, hexaorchestration.org, learn more about it, and hopefully join in, because it's a lot of fun. It's really exciting work that we're doing right now.
Awesome. Well, let's maybe jump into some questions then, because obviously we covered a lot of ground here, and we may have already touched on this a little bit, but it bears repeating to go a little bit deeper, because the question came up around how does our solution differentiate with or from other IAM solutions? And let's focus on the Cedar, AVP, and IDQL and Hexa.
Yeah, well, IDQL and Hexa, as we've mentioned, they're administrative functions, right? It's managing the policies, defining them, orchestrating them into the target environments, and keeping them consistent across those environments. So it's a policy administrative functionality. Today, it's an open source project that you can find on GitHub. A link to the project is also at the hexaorchestration.org website. So it's separate from that runtime environment of Amazon Verified Permissions and Cedar, right? They also have management capabilities, or will have, when it's generally available, management capabilities for defining the policies. But we can leverage IDQL as that central point, and or as that translation point, even if you're writing all your policies within AVP and Cedar. We can now take them and make them useful in other clouds as well. So extending what you can do in AWS.
So you mentioned, we do know from all the Amazon documentation right now that it's AVP is still in a private preview mode. I think this is more of an opinion question, just getting your personal take on it is, so there was the question of how quickly do you think AVP adoption will scale once out of the private preview?
Well, I think, again, given the number of customers that Amazon has for Amazon Web Services, I expect there to be many enterprises working with AVP and Cedar, as it becomes GA, to put it through its paces and see if it works in their environments. For those that have centered on Amazon as the primary cloud platform, it might be the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But we certainly will be eagerly watching that as it unfolds over here. I expect within the next several months. They have not announced any kind of target date specifically for general availability, but we'll be here watching and observing. Sure.
Got it. Last question, I'm just watching the thread here, so you mentioned extending AVP policies to apps and other clouds. Are there limitations in doing that? Maybe it's from a mapping perspective, or are there limitations? I don't want to infer here.
Oh yeah, there's definitely going to be limitations. One is to the target system that we're mapping to. Does it have a publicly available API for managing policies? Would be one thing, one basic requirement that we have. Mm-hmm. And the second is there a way to map IDQL to that target policy format? There will be some cases where, not that it's impossible, but it could be extremely difficult to do that and take a lot of developer time to do it. So we're looking today to target systems that have publicly available APIs for policy administration, and a policy format that we can map to readily. Like we demonstrated today, we can map pretty quickly to the Cedar format.
Gotcha. Well, I think that actually covers all of our questions.
Awesome. Well, this has been fun, Mark.
It has. And, I want to make sure that, from inviting people to go experience, what you and I have learned, everything that we talked about today, all those resources are publicly available documents. You can go see the reInvent announcement and learn all about the intent behind why AWS has built Cedar and AVP, and also that Cedar playground that you mentioned. I was even able to get in there and tinker a little bit myself. So that was really helpful to be able to do. And then, of course, you mentioned hexaorchestration.org as people are interested in working with the software that you and I have been working on, as well as joining the working group. And so one last bit of information, a final resource that we'll share with everybody is we mentioned identity orchestration several times in this, especially as we were talking about the commercial way that Mavericks can be used to extend AVP to existing apps, and then also to extend those policies to other clouds. We'll be sharing a report about why identity orchestration plays such a key role in people's multi-cloud strategies and multi-service strategies. So at the shortly after this webinar, we'll send everyone an email with that. And finally, any final questions that the audience has for you and I? I mean, you're the expert on this one, so it might go more your direction, but nevertheless, please feel free to reach out to of course, either of us to hear more. And we talked about that AWS to Cognito modernization story. Watch this space. We have another webinar in the works that we definitely want to share with you all, and as we dig deeper into Amazon Identity. Well, Jerry, thank you for joining me. It was a fun conversation, and we hope everyone found it as enjoyable as we did. And with that, we'll bid everyone adieu.
Awesome. Always a pleasure, Mark. Talk to everyone soon. Bye now.
Take care.